In the teeming heart of the Roman Empire, where the Tiber River sullenly wound its way, twisting like some serpentine monster through the ancient city of Rome, one man prepared for greatness or his ruin. The year was 46 BC, and the air hung heavy with anticipation and foreboding alike. Julius Caesar, conqueror of Gaul and architect of high conceit, had returned to Rome, stamping it with his grand reforms. But as the Senate watched Caesar's growing power with suspicion, their eyes turned to those around him. Decimus, a young patrician and a favorite of Caesar's own, had become one piece in an intrigue running from the marble floors of the Senate down into the dark alleys of the Suburra. Decimus had been thrust quickly up the ranks, impressing Caesar with his quick intellect and loyalty. His family, once powerful and now in decline, had placed high hopes on him for restoring their name to its former glory. Every morning that he put on his toga, to which was stitched the characteristic purple stripe that defined him as one of the patrician class, he knew that honor and danger came hand in glove with rank. This day he was summoned to a private audience with Caesar. He crossed Caesar's villa-sprawled gardens, where flowers, the smell of blooming violets in particular, did little to reassure his nervous feelings. The trickling of the fountains was no better. Standing by a marble statue, Caesar stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze far away. "You are loyal, Decimus," Caesar began, fixing his sharp eyes upon the young man. "That is why I chose you. But loyalty in Rome is as fragile as the first snow of winter. It melts quickly, especially when touched by power." Decimus squared his shoulders, his heart pounding. "I am at your service, Caesar." Caesar's expression relented slightly, and his eyes flickered across his face, like the passing of a shadow. "I need someone I trust. Rome is more divided than it would appear. The Senate has those within it who still talk of the Republic, of undoing everything we have won." He stopped, then lowered his voice. "I need you to be my eyes and ears in the Senate." The young man nodded, the weight of Caesar's words heavy upon him. The Senate was packed with men of ambition rivaled only by ruthlessness. Spying upon them would be treading a path thick with betrayal and suspicion. Whispers in the Senate. The following days, Decimus slunk along the shadows of the Senate House, steps muffled upon the stone floor. Senators spoke low, cloaked in suspicion. He listened intently to piece together fragments of whispered conversations. Rumors of plots against Caesar simmered. Each whispered word was a spark that might ignite into catastrophe. One night, while he was still hanging around the fringes of the Senate chamber, Decimus overheard two senators speaking in low tones. They spoke of the Ides of March, a day to restore liberty to Rome. His blood ran cold as the realization hit him that he had just heard something terrible. Caesar was in danger and Decimus was bound to protect him. That night, under the moon dancing across its surface, Decimus sat alone by the Tiber. The river flowed unendingly, so would Rome's history with or without Caesar. For a moment, he found himself questioning whether Rome would be better off without its new dictator. Yet it was to Caesar's favor that Decimus owed his position, and his family's resurgence. Loyalty was not an option. The fateful Ides of March. This morning, the Ides of March, Decimus mounted a horse and rode to Caesar's villa, his heart heavy with foreboding. He pressed Caesar to defer his trip to the Senate, trading on the privilege of intimacy. Caesar dismissed him with an indulgent smile. "The Ides of March," he mused, "seem no different than any other day, don't they?" As they drew near to the Senate, Decimus saw senators huddled together in small groups, their faces etched, stretched taut. He stayed decidedly close to Caesar up the marble steps, having a feeling that was akin to a shroud settling over him. Inside the Senate chamber, Decimus watched helplessly as the conspirators moved in. A senator, Casca, was the first to strike. His dagger blinked in the torchlight. The betrayal would be swift and brutal, each blow from men Caesar had once called allies. Decimus could not move, paralyzed by the horror of the scene, his loyalty to Caesar warring with his sense of survival. And in the mayhem, he looked at Decimus, his eyes asking in disbelief. But before he could utter even a word, there was the final stab and Caesar went down, his blood streaming onto the marble floor, reddening it, coloring it as scarlet as empire and treachery. The conspirators ran, but not after Decimus stood over Caesar's body with his toga bloodied, alone. The whole city of Rome was silent, like the very city was in bereavement from their great loss of a leader. After the fall, betrayal. The days following the deed were full of turmoil as Rome plunged into chaos. Caesar's death had ripped asunder the precarious balance of the city and started riots, stirring among a throng of ambitious folk wishing to supplant him. Decimus walked through the streets in a daze, tormented by his mind with the last look Caesar had given him, a mixture of trust and sorrow. But though the Senate was declaring the Republic restored, it was clear that the days of glory for Rome would soon be eclipsed by the looming presence of civil war. Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, vowed to avenge his father's death, while Mark Antony, Caesar's general, called forth soldiers to his support. The Republic which Decimus had served so loyally was about to become a battlefield. Decimus was caught between the ideal in which he once had believed and the reality that had consumed and digested it. The greatness of Rome was based on sacrifice and ambition, and it would end with the same. The silent legacy. Another lifetime later, Decimus sat on a hill not too far from the city, quiet and somber, looking down upon the ruins that once was an ornate temple to Jupiter. The empire, at the hands now of Augustus, who had been but a boy named Octavian, had its borders set in concrete across continents, from dark forests in Germania to the Sahara sands in Egypt. But he knew very well that with Caesar's fall, Rome had lost something irreplaceable. It was a role that had tied him to the fate of the empire, one that left scars as lasting as those left by Caesar's assassins. And a question came to his mind if Rome was worth the rivers of blood it required. Yet he knew deep down that even if Rome were a city built upon shadows, it would endure. He watched the Tiber River once more and felt the weight of history press upon him. Soon enough he too would be forgotten, just another figure lost to time. But Rome would continue, for in its shadows lived every soul which had bled for the empire.